Welcome to Electrified. It's your host, Dylan Loomis. Quick shout out to my newest patron, David T. Thank you for choosing to support the channel. Let's keep reason number one short and sweet. So when we're talking to people and they say the competition is coming, we can say something like this. Well, other companies can't do what Tesla is doing because Tesla has its own custom-built machines that are actually making Tesla vehicles and many of Tesla's components. Given that they're so vertically integrated, if another company just wanted to go out and buy a gigacast or buy hardware for or buy an octavalve, any of these products that Tesla has created, guess what? They can't do it because they're not available off the shelf. Thus, reason number one, as Tesla Economics has reminded us, is that Tesla has custom machines, it has custom components, and it also has custom software that no other company has access to, so no, they cannot just be duplicated. We will get to reason number two here shortly, but I do want to go over a few items from this Autoline After Hours video. There was some excellent Tesla takeaways in this video. Of course, the full thing will be linked below. One thing we all have to keep in mind, paint shops are typically one of the most expensive parts of an auto manufacturing plant. They can cost upwards of $300 million. Sandy said sometimes that's the minimum. They can also be one of the leading contributors to pollution of the plant. So if Tesla can somehow reduce the paint shop for the next gen platform, this of course is a major deal, and there's a chance this will happen because we just heard after some leaks after Investor Day, when people were asked about the next gen vehicle having paint or not, Tom Zhu said what? Paint is expensive. Even if Tesla does not remove the paint shop with the next-gen vehicle, the new manufacturing process that's a lot more modular will make the painting process much easier and more efficient. The actual paint robots will have to move much less, and it reduces a lot of complexity when it comes to the painting process. And it just seems like this is a narrative that is being slept on, and I want to help get it out there. The paint shop is typically often very energy intensive as well, but don't just take my word for it.
I see a huge advantage in the body shop, in the paint shop. So now that you're not sending an entire vehicle through the paint shop, the volume of a vehicle, so width-wise, height-wise, and length-wise, you can now paint in more of a planar fashion. So if you have two body sides, a hood, fenders, rear fascia, front fascia, the width, the amount of area you're going to have to take up, and even the tooling and articulation of your paint robots changes completely if you're only painting essentially from one direction, if you separated the vehicle and you send it through. So I think there's so many rabbit holes you can go down on the efficiencies that they'll gain with this new way that they're not only building the car, but how they paint the vehicle.
Corey said that right now, 43% of the cost of a Model Y is from the powertrain, the battery pack, the cooling pack, the gearboxes, which are made up of the front and rear motors for an all-wheel drive version. The cost of Tesla's next-gen drive unit is supposed to be $1,000 and will most likely be a rear-wheel drive vehicle. This immediately takes you to half of the cost because you only have one rear drive unit. This should be a 40 to 50 kilowatt hour battery pack made up of LFP or lithium iron phosphate cells. This right here is already a $10,000 to $12,000 savings off the manufacturing cost. Tesla is also insourcing many components. We talk about its vertical integration all the time, and this improves Tesla's margins greatly because they're not paying those margins to suppliers. So just keep in mind that roughly half of the cost of a Tesla is from the powertrain, the battery pack, the cooling pack, and the gearboxes. At Tesla's Investor Day, they essentially just laid out how they're going to drastically reduce these costs for the next-gen platform. On the other hand, we have VW showing a prototype, which is easy, and some pictures with minimal detail of how they're actually going to build this and sell it profitably, but everybody in the mainstream media is currently eating it up. It's just the world that we live in right now, and hey, maybe it'll keep the Tesla share price down a little bit lower for a little bit longer so we can grab a little bit more. NFA.
I mean, I'm all excited. I just saw what I was hoping to see, and that drops the price significantly because it's fully automatable. General Motors invented that, give them kudos for that, but they invented the hairpin motor, and it is a breeze to automate. It's fabulously easy to automate those. I don't have a Pavesi machine is a wonder to watch, but they're expensive. They're the things that usually people buy from windings. This is just absolutely amazing. Now, what do you get out of that? Well, you get a boost somewhere between 20 and 30% better power out of that thing. And it costs less, at least 15+% less, because I can fully automate it. It's a great idea.
We know to date the dry battery electrode process for Tesla creating 4680s has been somewhat of a limiting factor. We know that they were using this for the anode, but the question is, have they figured it out for the cathode? And here's what Corey had to say.
They did mention, somebody asked a question, are you using a dry process on the anode and the cathode? And their answer was both. So I believe the one that's on the copper, I forget, I think it's the anode, that they've gotten the dry process down. But the cathode, from based on what they said both on that. So I feel like they've struggled to scale the second half of it. But clearly there was a ton of production happening while we were there.
It sounds like at Giga Austin there are two types of 4680s being made, a wet process version and a dry process version. The dry, of course, is the dry battery electrode. But I think maybe more importantly, right now it sounds like most of the Model Ys being made at Giga Austin are actually 2170 cells, from what Corey and Sandy were saying. Here's a good clip from Corey about Tesla switching the next-gen vehicle to 48-volt architecture. Yes, some other auto manufacturers are using 48 volts for some functions in certain vehicles, but Tesla should be the first to switch the entire vehicle, which is why it's such a big deal.
It only makes sense to switch to 48 volts. The savings that you can get on the wiring is astronomical. And I was having dinner with a couple engineers on Tuesday, and I mentioned this, and all of them were like, oh yeah, everyone's known that 48 volts is the right voltage, but and these people worked at traditional OEMs. And they're like, yeah, but no one could ever commit. And I said, well, Tesla's doing it. And they're like, well, it's the right decision. So even traditional OEM engineers know that this is the right decision.
The summary of what Corey went on to say is that other OEMs that don't switch to this 48-volt architecture will be at a structural disadvantage. The customer may have no idea, but it'll show up in either the pricing of the vehicle or lost profit margins for Tesla's competition. You know how Tesla makes and sells every vehicle with the FSD computer or the FSD hardware, whether the end consumer is actually using that hardware or not? Well, this is a slept-on point.
About 3 million of those vehicles are driving around with an extra $1,000 worth of hardware that's not being utilized. So 3 million times 1,000 is what? 3 billion?
Yeah.
$3 billion of hardware that's just driving around the road, not being used to its capability, because it still would need some processing power for your basic safety system. So the $1,000 is actually a very conservative amount of extra computing power for hardware 2.5, 3, and now hardware 4. I think it's wild considering how we've worked with traditional OEMs that'll have 7 wire harnesses for all the trim levels because they don't want to give away $2 extra worth of wiring in the LT versus the LS. But Tesla will give away $1,000 worth of computing power on every vehicle, which then drops the complexity level in the plant down to world-class levels. Because every Model 3 and Model Y all gets the same module.
Right.
And it's not just the manufacturing that's simplified, but this also future-proofs most of these Tesla vehicles to some degree, because sure, we don't know how FSD will play out with hardware 3 versus 4, but there is a world where once it's solved, more people do have the option to turn that on because the cars are future-proofed with the hardware. And what have we always said about Tesla? Tesla is playing the long game. They'll spend money, do the work, do things in-house now so that in the long term, they reap all of the rewards. This is one great microcosm of Tesla doing just that. And guess what? Legacy OEMs don't have the luxury of playing the long game. They need to make things happen right now before they go out of business. So it's just such a tough position for them to be in. Honestly, though, this upcoming insight from Corey was one of the coolest takeaways for me, and it really highlights how different the culture is at Tesla, which again, this is part 2 why nobody else can copy what Tesla is doing, because you can't just copy stuff like culture overnight.
The culture of the people is different. When I interface with a lot of my friends and classmates who work at traditional OEMs, typically my conversation with them It's like, hey, how's it going? And they talk about their career. They talk
Yeah.
about their career inside of GM or Ford. Oh, well, I'm applied for a level 8 and my bonus was this. And it's like, you talk to anyone from Tesla and it's never about themselves. It's always about where the company's going, the advancement of their goals and their mission. It's like a different mentality, and it's kind of actually refreshing.
So honestly, I just feel like I have to do my part to get this information out there, because this is the type of stuff that the general public has no idea about. All of the vertical integration at Tesla and how it really is a culture. They have their own Tesla operating system to actually run the day-to-day at the business, the agile manufacturing where all teams work together. They have a lot of cross-discipline interactions going on. The C-suite people are actually on the manufacturing line talking to them and solving problems together. This can't be duplicated overnight. So to sum up the 2 reasons nobody else can copy Tesla, reason number 1, manufacturing. Tesla has custom hardware, software, and processes that can't be bought or duplicated off the shelf. Reason number 2 is, of course, the culture. It's all about the mission and working together. Here's a cherry on top from John.
Today's cars are, even if it was 10 or 20 years ago or whatever, compared to 1967, the modern car was so much more car for the money. But the reality is, I mean, historically in the United States, it took 24, 25 weeks of income, annual income, for somebody to be able to afford a car. Right now, the average price of a car is about 50 grand, and the average household income is about 65 grand. So that affordability index of 25 weeks, 24 weeks of income is blown way out of kilter. If Tesla or anybody can come out with a good $25,000 car, and it's look, the reality is, to sell it, you got to have the amenities that people are expecting. The challenge is make a profit on it. But if somebody comes out with a decent electric that they can make a profit on, it's going to be the modern day Model T. Sales will explode.
I just happen to be of the camp that has super high confidence Tesla will be the company to sell this $25,000 or $30,000 car at a profit with the amenities, causing sales to explode. A couple of quick ones. VW is now planning to invest in mines to meet half of its own demand, but they also want its battery division PowerCo to actually sell cells to third-party customers. The first PowerCo customer is set to be Ford, as they're making a vehicle with Volkswagen's MEB platform. Interesting to note though, a VW spokesperson said the bottleneck for raw materials is mining capacity, when Tesla has said it's the refining capacity. Of course, it depends on what specific raw material you're talking about. Oregon has been forced to temporarily halt the EV incentive program because too many people have been signing up and taking advantage of it. Essentially, this fund is running out of money. Over the past 4 to 5 years, there have been 2 separate incentives that can be combined for up to an incentive of $7,500. There's no word on a time frame to bring this back. 46 Ford dealers in North Carolina have filed a petition challenging Ford's new EV dealership programs. Ford has made some changes and concessions to the program, but it sounds like these have been insufficient to address the dealers' concerns. They're concerned about excessive intrusion by Ford into dealers' day-to-day operations. The dealers allege the voluntary program is illegal since it would prohibit those who don't opt in from selling EVs. Dealers are not pleased. They're complaining specifically about no haggle pricing and having to offer remote pickup and delivery. Alarm bells should be going off in your head, because these dealers are complaining about good things for the consumer, having a set price and being able to have a remote pickup for your vehicle. A Benchmark Minerals analyst speaking of the Chinese auto market said it's obvious 2023 will be the year full of fierce competition, not just among NEV brands, but also between NEV and ICE cars. The ICE manufacturers are also squarely in this price-cutting mix. The raw material sourcing requirements for the IRA are being loosened as we speak. Biden has been talking with some people in the EU, and European car makers and raw material producers will get access to the US tax breaks. The aim is to ensure critical raw materials for EVs can be extracted or processed in the EU, and they will be treated in the same way as if they came from the US. The representatives are still negotiating the specific requirements. You can find me on Twitter at DylanLoomis22. Hope you guys have a wonderful and a safe weekend. Please like the video if you did, and a huge thank you to all of my Patreon supporters.